Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to Conversations Over Coffee. I am your host, Steve Wernick, Reb Steve, one of the rabbis here at Beth Tzedec, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'd like saying that, Julie. It's kind of fun. It's like, what they don't teach in rabbinical school is how to become a TV host. Or maybe now, though, of course, after COVID, we'll get to that. What are the skill sets that you need to learn? My guest this morning is a dear friend and one of the newest leaders of the Jewish world. That's Dr. Shuli Reuben Schwartz, who is Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, JTS, which is where I went to rabbinical school, where my father went to rabbinical school, and where many of my colleagues have gone to rabbinical school as well as undergraduate and so forth. So welcome, Shuli. It's so nice to see you again.
Wonderful to be here and to be in conversation with you.
Thank you
for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being had. First of all, how are you doing?
Thank God. It's been, we've all experienced so much these past 19, 20 months now. And it is wonderful to be sitting in my office on the campus of the Jewish Theological Seminary and to have the campus full again with students and faculty and staff, and just feeling very grateful.
And a lot of changes in the campus too, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But let's start with your area of academic research has been in American Jewish history, and from that perspective, and now leading one of the iconic historical institutions of Jewish learning in the Jewish world, really in the Jewish world.
Mm-hmm.
You must think about this all the time. What are some of the trends, the historic trends that you're seeing, and and what are the challenges that they pose to today's Jewish community?
Well, I mean, look, yes, as a historian, I look back before I look forward. I think we need to understand where we're coming from, how we got to where we are today. I'm always conscious of the challenges that my predecessors faced. I'm only the 8th chancellor in the 135-year history of JTS. And beginning, when I look back to the 20th century and I think of the challenges that Solomon Schechter faced, for example, of really establishing a center for Jewish learning, Jewish scholarship in the United States, trying to meet the needs of Eastern European Jewish immigrants, the religious needs, the intellectual needs, the needs for spiritual leadership. Those were challenges of that era, and each chancellor has faced challenges and opportunities as the Jewish community has evolved. So now, sure, there are many challenges. We could spend this half an hour just talking about the challenges of COVID, but of course, those are not the only challenges that we face. A lot of the changes in society predated COVID. Some of them have been accelerated by COVID, and some of them have been masked by COVID.
It's an interesting choice of words.
Right.
Masks
Exactly.
and COVID.
That's right. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, there's so much. We're in a world where the pace of change seems to accelerate every month, where we want quick fixes. And, I'm chancellor of an institution that believes in deep learning. Deep learning is not quick. It's not utilitarian. It's really giving our students the opportunity to immerse themselves in the texts of our tradition and in the history, ideas, and literary products of our people, to be nourished by them, and to gain a sense of facility with those texts and experiences, so that they in turn can nourish others with it. That goes against the grain of the world in which we live. That's just one of the challenges we face. There are many.
So let's stick with that challenge a little bit more. Having been at USCJ and before that in the pulpit, and now back again in the pulpit, and you also have spent time in pulpit life and rabbinic households and families and so forth. There continues to be a lot of anxiety over the Jewish behaviors and choices of the next generation, and how we engage them, which very often is like, how do we get them back in shul? I'm curious from the perspective of JTS, where the student body very often is of that next generation. What are some of the things that you're seeing, learning, and hoping to accomplish with regard to the training of future generations of Jewish leadership and how they engage their peers and the generation coming after them?
So that's, of course, a great question. And I guess I just want to begin by reassuring you and your listeners that the breastfeeding about, oh my God, what is going to be with the next generation, has a venerable tradition. I could easily read you a quote from 1895, rabbis at a conference tearing their hair out. What are we going to do? The young people are not here, they're not coming. So while the challenges of this era have new manifestations, this is an age-old concern. But what is a concern is actually what we believe in and ascribe to, right? We understand Judaism as a rich tradition that evolves as each generation tries to figure out how to develop its own relationship with the divine, and how to find religious meaning, and how to find community. Judaism would not exist still today if it stultified thousands of years ago. And so what seems like a problem is actually the feeling of Judaism evolving.
So personally, I agree with you with that. I want to press you a little bit more on it, though. There seems to be a qualitative difference in terms of our contemporary experience, and that difference, I think, is impacted by at least three new realities that our ancestors didn't have to face with. One is the very existence and success of Israel. I think that Israel, in many ways, what I'd like to say to people is, like, if you really think about it, we as a people have accomplished everything we've prayed for the last 2,000 years, except for the coming of Mashiach. Which is astonishing if you take a step back about that, right? We've reestablished ourselves. Israel's thriving. Yes, it's complicated, it has its issues and so forth, but it exists and it's thriving, and it can defend itself by and large. So that's a good thing. In the rest of the world where Jews live, we've basically achieved unparalleled success and freedom and equality. Yes, anti-Semitism's on the rise. Yes, it's not always been easy. Yes, there's lots of reasons to be cautious and concerned. But when one looks at the educational, economic, and social indicators, You know, Jews have arrived and have made it. And so the external issues or the external pressures that have kept Jew as other are not the same as that they were 2 generations ago or before that. And the third, the outcome of that, I think, is if you look at a lot of the data that's been put forward, the language that you used in and reminding us not to pull out the rest of our hair is religious language, yet the emphasis of the next generation seems to be cultural. And so they're more interested in bagels and cream cheese and lighting Hanukkah candles than they are necessarily in encounters with the divine, or at least as the tradition and the text would imagine that to be. So I think that it seems to me that there's something substantively different going on in this generation as a result of at least those factors and probably more. And I'm just wondering to what extent does that get experienced at JTS? And if you could share with us elements of your vision that you think are specifically aimed towards addressing those challenges.
Okay, so we could debate whether it's different or not. I actually think it's less different than we imagine, but we'll put that aside, right? What do we do about it? Either way, it's our challenge, right? And yes, certainly the recent Pew study, for example, as it relates to American Jewry, talks about this category of nuns, right? Jews of no religion, which gets at a little bit what you're talking about, right? So either we could say, oh my goodness, how is it possible to have Jews of no religion? They must not care at all. Or we could say, well, actually, these are all Jews that feel that identify as Jews. They have a hard time thinking about the religious aspect of that. But if we think back to our understanding of Judaism, it's a holistic thing. It is not only about God and religion, which is a Christian term anyway, not a Jewish term, right? My great-grandparents and your great-grandparents wouldn't have said, Judaism is my religion. Judaism was who they were. It was everything about them. And culture was part of that. What you're describing is it feels like it's culture divorced from religion. And that is problematic, because what nourishes culture? We are at our core a religious civilization. And that is what I feel it is our obligation and privilege to educate future leaders to be able to engage Jews where they are now, and if that's culture, and whether it's bagels and lox or whatever, art or movies, whatever it is, right? And nourish that with a much deeper and more sophisticated and spiritually meaningful core elements of Judaism, including what we'll call the religion of Judaism, so that young people begin to make those kinds of connections, because they're not naturally making them. They're not naturally affiliating the way their parents did. They're not joining groups the way their parents did. And so to be successful, we need to meet the people where they are. That's what leaders always need to do, right? Meet them where they are, not where we want them to be, but have the tools to have a deep level of engagement so that they see how they will benefit from more.
what are some of those tools that leaders need to be successful in 21st century diaspora Judaism?
Look, the core way that to be successful remains the same, right? And that goes back to what I said before. It's not about a quick fix education of, as you said, half jokingly, learning how to host a program such as this one, right? What makes people tune into what you are hosting is the learning, the commitment, the Yiddishkeit, what you exude in who you are and the way in which you engage with your audience. That is what's appealing. Okay, you also have a good radio voice and people want to listen to you, and you have a great sense of humor, but that's not what we teach, right? You have a comfort and a love of our tradition that becomes contagious when other people are in your presence. And it's those, so number one, we want to give leaders the education, both book learning and experiential learning, so that they can own our tradition themselves. And then we want to give them experience in many different kinds of settings so that they have the skills and the orientation and the facility to engage Jews wherever they are.
I was we were talking before in our preparation for today.
Mm-hmm.
That I thought it was interesting that one of the challenges, certainly at Beth Tzedec, and I think this is true in a lot of places, is we have a very significant critical mass of people, mostly over 50, mostly over 55, who like things the way they are. Yeah, maybe they want them to be better and they're willing to tinker with the edges, but not with the essence. And yet, they want to see their kids and their grandkids involved. What leadership advice do you give future, not you, does JTS give, the future leadership of rabbis and chazanim to, how do you navigate the inherent challenge of legacy and tradition and the desire for innovation?
Right, that's always the tricky balance, right? It is helping people who are just comfortable with the way things are, but also really care about their children and especially their grandchildren, right? And helping them feel comfortable gradually with change, right? We all do that. Think of where we've all come, right? We all lived through the point. I remember, the first computer that I got, and I remember saying to my late husband, whom you knew, Gershon, I said, I'm going to keep writing on my yellow pads because that's how I think. And then he was a great typist. I couldn't type. I'm like, you'll type it onto the computer, and that's what I will do. And then within 2 weeks, I said, well, that's ridiculous. Obviously, now I figured out how to think while typing on a computer. Same whatever with our phones or with the internet. How many of us said, well, I'm just going to use it for X. But, well, you want to communicate with your grandkids, you're going to learn how to text. Right?
Well, so I think that's a really good example. So they're not teaching cursive anymore in school.
Right.
I mean, you learn the alphabet and you learn it in block letters, but you don't learn to write anymore longhand.
Right. And I'm sure some people are nostalgic for the beautiful florid writing that children used to learn.
And
Not
also it's
so
like,
much.
it's also, I think the notion of letter writing is nostalgia too. You read letters that were sent to soldiers and by soldiers during World War II or World War I. They'd be 4 or 5 pages long, and engage in really beautiful storytelling, as opposed to a text. Now you don't even have to write that. You just, hey Siri, text Shuli and reminder, we have conversation over coffee Monday, 12:30.
Yes. So a good example of that is, my great nieces and nephews, when I send them a birthday gift, and these kids are 3 and 4 years old, so they sort of know me, but especially in COVID, not so well because we haven't seen them. They now send me a video, thank you, and I see them using the gift that I gave them. How great is that?
Related to that, and I wonder to what extent it has an impact on learning, related to that, for example, is Safaria.org. In some ways, I think Safaria has made my library obsolete, because it's put all of, or not, maybe not all of, but a whole lot of the Jewish textual experience online. It's translated it, hyperlinked all the different commentaries to each other.
Right.
What's been the impact that you've seen at JTS on those kinds of innovations and technologies?
Right. It's magnificent. What a gift to the world Safaria has offered to us. And yes, we can be nostalgic. I have beautiful books behind me, but I've culled my books because so much is available online. And so really, what is the function of the books? Is it to have a beautiful background if you're not going to use them? Or is the goal learning, deep learning? So our faculty, I don't know, half dozen years ago already, began to have conversations and saying, okay, our students are preparing on Safaria. So let's now use those tools to improve the learning experience in the classroom, rather than saying, nope, you must prepare using, the Shas that, the Talmud that doesn't have any nikud, has no punctuation, and you've got to break your teeth the way I broke my teeth, is one way of saying that, right? But what's the point? What is the ultimate goal of this learning? As I think, as I said before, right? We want students to own the riches of our tradition and make it their own. And if there are tools that facilitate that, we should embrace them.
How long have you been in the position now? 2 years?
Not yet.
Not yet?
I don't know, about 17 months, 18
Yeah,
months.
just as COVID was hitting.
Right. Yes.
Aside from the priorities that go with COVID and reopening and being in person and so forth, share with us, your top 3 priorities for JTS at this moment.
Well, the first top priority is what we've just been talking about. What does it mean to train leaders for our generation and the next generation and the generation after that, right? That is what we're all about. So that is my top priority. As you know, there are 5 schools at JTS. We are training many different kinds of Jewish leaders, clergy, Jewish communal professionals, Jewish educators, academics, and our future lay leaders who are attend the undergraduate program, Liss College with Columbia and Barnard. So really figuring out how to continue to do that excellently, right? Every decade, what it means to do that excellently evolves. So a part of that is curricular challenges. Part of that is replenishing our faculty, etc. Right? We have a beautiful revitalized campus, how to make the most of the beautiful spaces that we have now that we can be back face to face. What does it mean to create community here? So those are some of the things that I hope to achieve. And then finally, look, I think we live in a world where the lessons of our people, the kind of learning that we do, the critical study of texts, the search for intellectual truth, the search for religious truth, the search for meaning. These, unfortunately, are things that are now contested in the world in which we live. And I think JTS has something important to offer to the world by modeling ways to integrate those truths, to not only find meaning ourselves, but bring meaning to the discourse in the public square.
Your predecessor, Professor Arnie Eisen, vis-a-vis the relationship of JTS to the conservative movement, used to talk of JTS as being of the movement, but not necessarily in the movement, at that time. I'm wondering what is the relationship that you see for JTS vis-a-vis conservative Judaism, the conservative movement?
Look, I think that the vision of conservative Judaism evolves naturally and organically from just the kind of learning and teaching and training that we do at JTS, right? This integrated approach to Jewish learning that takes the best of critical scholarship and the desire for religious meaning, and integrates that, leads to a kind of Judaism that is rich and open and nourishing and not exclusive, right? Everyone's got to find their way in, and you got to be able to ask all the questions that you want, and you got to make it your own and pay it forward to the next generation. That's conservative Judaism. It grows out of our teaching. I think JTS has an important role in articulating that vision for the 21st century. And that's the role that I think JTS has always played and should continue to play.
In the moments that are remaining, any additional thoughts or points that you want to make sure that our audience gets an opportunity to hear?
Just really how grateful I feel to be in this role. I'm eager to be able to hit the road, as COVID, God willing, will be in the rear view mirror primarily. I would love to get across the border and spend some time with the North American Jewish community, and just kind of eager to be able to effect this vision on a broader canvas.
Well, when we can find that opportunity, we'll do that. I know that Rabbi Dina Luedis is planning on coming here for a visit, certainly from the Center for Pastoral Care at JTS, and synergetic with our Center for Spiritual Wellbeing. So we're looking forward to some partnerships in that regard. Okay, thank you, Shuli, for being with us, and we wish you Hatzlacha Rabbah and look forward to hearing great things coming out of JTS into the future. Next week on Conversations Over Coffee, my guest is Dr. Michael Mishna. And whereas this week we may have been talking with JTS, next week we go out of this world, literally, Dr. Mishna is the head of Mars exploration for NASA. So we're going to be going to Mars. It's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to join us for that. And for all the opportunities to engage religiously, spiritually, culturally, to be inspired and enabled to live a meaningful Jewish life, you can find us at www.beth-tzedec.org. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye.